Hello everybody, this is GeneralJannis, and today I'm looking at the Daemon Primarchs. Now all the legions, the special god-specific legions of Chaos have gotten their own new codex, and now we have fully new rules for all the Primarchs, also new points, etc. So it's important now to look at in the codex, the new codex editions, how do the Primarchs compare to each other, and who would win a potential 1-versus-1 battle across these leaders of the Chaos Legions. So with no further ado, let's get started. So today, the 23rd of March, of May, so the Manchester United Tottenham game didn't go as planned, so I will not watch football for a while. So as I said in this video, looking at the Daemon Primarchs, the new, let's say, stats, abilities, weapon rules, what has changed. And then I will be looking at their damage output versus typical targets, and then overall per point comparison, also including their durability, and then Primarch versus Primarch, expected damage, how will these guys fare against each other, what can they select to improve their odds. Before I get started, as always, a big shout out and special thanks to all my YouTube members, GeneralJannis supporters. If you want to support my efforts to do even more Math Hammer analysis and so on, and be able to preview videos and get some more information, please consider becoming a GeneralJannis supporter. So let's look at the updated datasheets and the points of the Primarchs. So Mortarion is 380 points. I did also a special video for him for the new Codex edition. He still has the 5+ Feel No Pain. His stat line is he's the Primarch with the highest toughness, a toughness 12. He can now his abilities are completely changed from the Index edition. He can deal mortal wounds to nearby enemies after moving with quite high chance, but he has to come within 6 inches at the end of his move. In the choice, he has some reactive abilities which are quite interesting. He can select one of the either a unit close to him or himself can fight on death. A unit can shoot back whilst it being shot at, but it has to shoot at the same enemy. Or you can make some sort of a reactive move if the enemy comes close to Mortarion. And so some quite different abilities than he had before. Before he was giving an aura to so he could ignore modifiers, and also Death Card could ignore modifiers, but now he's more a reactive and quite interesting collection of these abilities. And the army rule now for Death Card has been improved. It's -1 toughness contagion, plus the choice of either -1 save of the enemy, which is really strong for a lot of armies with power armor, let's say. -1 to be hit. This was previously -1 weapon skill or ballistic skill, so a bit lower. It's a bit less good, let's say. Or minus leadership, objective control, and movement for the enemy. His weapons are, he has the ranged weapon, the lantern pistol, and the wrought wind, let's say psychic attack, even if Mortarion hates psykers. And the melee weapons, his silence profile, the sweep profile has become a good shine up, so he has 15 attacks and it's a damage 2. So as we will see, his sweep profile is better compared to the strike for a lot of targets. His damage on the strike also has been a bit improved, but the main improvement has been his sweep profile and especially damage 2. If we look at Magnus the Red, we expect the points to be 420 points in the new Codex edition. He's faster than Mortarion, but toughness 11. His abilities also changed. Previously was giving +1 to hit and +1 to wound. Now he can cast 2 ritual spells, and he has +2 while casting them in the new army rule. So he's the strongest, let's say, psyker as expected for Thousans Sons. There is only 4 rituals, let's say, to choose from. You can take a Doom Bolt to do mortal wounds, either D3 or D3+3, depending on the warp charge value. There is another ritual where you select an enemy where you reroll once in the shooting phase. He can give extra move to a unit, or we can take a ritual to improve the AP either by -1 or -2, depending on the cast value here. For his own abilities, he has 3 to select from, -1 to incoming damage, basically disgusting resilience. This is unchanged. He has an aura of +2 inch moves for himself and the Thousans Sons units, and also an interesting ability where you can select an enemy unit when that shoots, all the weapons treat become hazardous. And he has also strength 16 blade of Magnus, the strike and the sweep, also damage 2. He also has some nice range weapons, as we will see, the gaze of Magnus and Tzeentch's firestorm, and combined, let's say, with a doom bolt, he can also do more shooting damage, range damage, let's say. And then if we look at Angron, also quite a different profile now, or changed from the index. He's 385 points now, so reduce the points. The profile stays, the stat line stays the same. Now, previously he could be resurrected with 666s from the Khorne blessing dice, but now he's with full wounds. Now he's only resurrected with half the wounds, 8 wounds on a 666. He can the abilities, the 3 that he can choose from are: he can reroll some of the blessing dice. He has an aura that enemy units cannot fall back if they don't pass their leadership test, or he has a interesting aura like Mortarion had before, where you can maybe ignore modifiers to move, charge, advance, hit, weapon skills, and modifiers for melee attacks. So this is could be really good to buff also other World Eater units close to his aura. And the army rule, the blessings of Khorne with a lot of dice, there is a lot of buffs that you can choose from. There is no longer a 6+ feel no pain. But the best for Angron, I think, for his damage output is to get lethal hits and sustain hits. The one where you get devastating wounds is not useful for Angron himself, but with his very strong melee weapons, they already have devastating wounds. So if you combine lethal hits and sustained hits, I'll show you the damage output. This is quite strong. His attack is d6+2, strength only 14. I've seen a lot of memes where Angron is looking, how can I have a strength 14 thing when my bookwormy Magnus brother has strength 16, but it's basically the damage output, and the wound rate here is very high, and also a sweep with damage to 16 attacks. And then finally Fulgrim, where we also looked the first one to get a codex with the Emperor's Children. He's the fastest of the lot, 16 inches movement. He has abilities that he can poison an enemy after making a shooting or fighting attack. He can select an enemy and that enemy is poisoned, and then for the rest of the battle in the command phase on a 4+, this enemy will continue taking d3 mortal wounds on a 4+. He has a shooting weapon, a leash, a lash, and then he has his demonic blades that are sustained hits. Again, a strong profile like the rest of his brothers, and then a sweep profile with damage 2, and also his tail, he can get some extra attacks. The abilities he can choose from, he can choose to be -1 to be hit in either the shooting, both shooting and melee. He has also a fight first ability, and then he has the aura leadership test to again like Angron, that the enemy, if he's within Fulgrim, he selects this one. The enemy cannot fall back if they don't pass the leadership test. And the army rule for the Emperor's Children is advance and charge. So with 16 inches advancing and be able to charge, Fulgrim could reach a lot of places on the tabletop. So here is now we are looking at the damage output of the Primarchs weapons with and without army rules. I haven't included every buff you can get, let's say, with stratagem, detachment rules, etc. I'm just looking at the army rules and their base profiles. So here we see Magnus first, his weapons. The Gaze of Magnus and Tzeentch's Firestorm can add some damage, especially versus infantry. Here we can see the average versus the infantry targets I'm typically simulating, and the average versus vehicle targets. The Gaze of Magnus also good versus vehicles. And then in melee, the Blade of Magnus, the sweep and the strike. The sweep is better up until Marine equivalent or intercessor, and then from Terminators and upwards it's better to take the strike profile. And then if we look at the total damage here for shooting at 12 inches range and then charging and doing the melee damage, here you can see the quite high damage output. but especially very strong against infantry. If we add, let's say, adding that the shooting is buffed by, we are doing a large Doom Bolt with D3+3 mortal wounds on these targets, and we are giving reroll hit rolls for the shooting, the Firestorm and the Gaze of Magnus, rerolling hit rolls of 1 because they're hitting on 2s. And then the melee damage, you see it's quite increased the damage output a lot based on these Doom Bolt mortal wounds. If we then look at Angron with his strike attack and the sweep attack, like for his brother Magnus, up until marine equivalents, the sweep profile is the best. But afterwards, you should, from Terminators and upwards, you should take the strike profile for most damage output. And here you can see the total damage output is really especially very strong against vehicles with a D6+2 weapon of his strike profile. He can also kill some infantry, but not as much as Magnus, for example. And this is without any Khorne blessings, and if we add lethal hits and sustained hits, you can see the damage is improved quite a lot, especially here for vehicles. We can be killing, let's say, almost a big knight here, but we can certainly take out a Land Raider and a couple of rhinos if we need to do that. And then if we have a Fulgrim, his Malefic Lash is not very strong. It's a bit shooting at 12-inch range. And then the Demonic Blades, the strike profile better from Terminators and up. And the sweep profile, let's say, is better up until marine equivalent. And the Serpentine Tail adds a little bit of damage. The total damage is quite average compared at least to his brothers, both for infantry and vehicles here. And then Mortarion with the Lantern Pistol, 24-inch, and the Rotwind, he can do some shooting damage, but not as high damage as his brother Magnus. And then different to his brother, the sweep profile with now 15 attacks compared to only 5 strike attacks is better up until Terminators, so it's only better to use the strike from a Rhino or another vehicle and upwards. But otherwise, for most infantry targets, it's better to go with a sweep profile, interestingly enough. And then if we see here the total shooting at 12-inch and the melee damage here, this is the damage output, not as high as Magnus and or Angron here, better than Angron versus infantry. But if we add, for example, the Contagion -1 save, army rule, we get better damage output also for Mortarion. And this is just a graphical interpretation of the damage output. So this is the average versus the infantry targets. This is the average versus the vehicle targets. These are the wounds per target, let's say. Here we have Magnus, and then when we have a buffed Magnus that also is shooting a Doom Bolt, and he reroll once to hit for his shooting. Then we have the red is Angron, and then we have Angron with sustained and lethal hits blessing. Fulgrim with no, the baseline damage. The army rule doesn't give him some more benefits here. Mortarion, and then with Mortarion having the enemy in Contagion -1 save if we select that plague. And we see versus infantry the total shooting 12-inch damage and melee damage. Magnus is the leader here. Angron is not as strong versus infantry. But when we go to vehicles and heavier, tougher targets, then Angron has the most damage output. Fulgrim is in the middle of the line, and Mortarion is better versus infantry because his sweep profile is better. And then some of the vehicles, he's the least damage outputting here. Now, basically summarizing again, now point corrected here, they are quite almost costed very similarly. Magnus is a bit more expensive. Here I'm also looking at the durability with a collection of weapons attacking our Primarchs, and then I have an index here. So an index 100 versus light weapons like bolters and stuff like that is per 100 points. This means it's an intercessor, and 100 for heavy weapons. The Predator, the Space Marine Predator tank is the index 100. So we can see the 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 Primarch with the highest durability is definitely Mortarion with his toughness 12 and 5+ feel no pain. He's definitely the most durable. He can also buff his durability if we select the plague -1 to be hit, and the enemy is in contagion. So this improves his durability. If we look at the damage output, here is versus infantry, point corrected to 100 point, and this is the damage versus the vehicles I'm typically simulating per 100 points. Magnus has the best shooting damage, also at 24-inch range and 12-inch range, both versus infantry and vehicles. Angron has the best melee damage output per point, especially versus vehicles. Versus infantry, he needs the lethal and sustained hits to do this damage per point here. Fulgrim is in the middle of the pack, let's say here, and Mortarion with contagion -1 save is not as good shooting as Magnus here, but he's quite good versus infantry, not as strong versus vehicles. So if we now move apart from what the Primarchs can do versus other targets, but what can they do against each other? So in this Primarch versus Primarch calculations, I've included the relevant army rules. I have not included specific detachments and any stratagems or anything like that. So in these battles here, I would have the Magnus having the -1 damage ability activated to reduce the incoming damage, and we assume that he can, in his shooting phase, he can cast 2 rituals. I'm assuming here just a normal Doom Bolt, not the heavy type, and a reroll once to hit for his shooting damage. For Angron, I'm assuming the Khorne blesses him with both sustained hits and lethal hits, and he chooses his ability to ignore modifiers, so he can damage, for example, Fulgrim and Mortarion if they would select -1 to be hit. Fulgrim is assumed to have -1 to be hit or fight first. I will show you the results. Basically, Fulgrim's defensive profile is the same as Angron's defensive profile, but with -1 to be hit, you'll see he's a bit more durable. And Mortarion has the -1 toughness to contagion and -1 to be hit. -1 save wouldn't really take this battle, doesn't make a big difference versus 4+ invulnerable save enemies. And in a real battle, he could also have been activating fighting on death of his reactive skill. So this is this could be on a 2+. He can fight back if he's killed. And here we see the Primarch versus Primarch damage output table. So here we have the attackers here, and here we have the defenders. So here Magnus with a Doom Bolt and reroll once for the shooting. Here you can see what shooting damage he does versus another Magnus, Angron, Fulgrim, and Mortarion. And then in melee, and then the total damage output here. Angron only has melee damage output, and Fulgrim, here we have his damage, and here Mortarion shooting and melee damage. So if we look at Magnus's damage output with this configuration, he's expected to kill basically Angron with 1 shooting, Doom Bolt, and rerolling once, and then melee damage. He should be able to expected to kill Angron. If Fulgrim doesn't take -1 to be hit, he could also kill him, but Fulgrim could select to fight first. But Fulgrim versus Magnus, he would only do, let's say, 8-9 wounds expected here. Angron can kill almost a mirror Angron or Fulgrim. He doesn't care about the -1 to be hit, but he cannot kill Magnus in one go or Mortarion. Fulgrim, he cannot one-shot any of his brothers, but if he fights first and impact with the poison and hopefully survive and be able to fight first next turn as well, he could be killing them with 2 rounds of fighting, except Mortarion here. Then Mortarion is the most durable. He takes the least amount of damage. Angron is the one that can do most damage to Mortarion, and should be able to survive versus all his brothers here. And with 2 rounds, he could be able to kill his brothers, except another Mortarion here. But he could maybe add a little bit of mortal wounds after his movement, and he can be very vengeful by fighting on death to seal the deal. But of course, these numbers is the expected numbers, the average. But in a real situation with dice rolling, you would be having a lot of 4+ invulnerable saves, and if you're making a lot of those or failing a lot of those, the numbers, of course, there is a lot of variation here. This is if you make thousands of battles, this is what the results would be. So, reaching the summary and final thoughts, now all our Daemon Primarchs, all our legions have received new codexes and new rules. Interestingly enough, most of the Primarchs are not buffing the rest of the units in their armies so much as before. Mortarion has some interesting reactive skills that can help his sons, let's say the Death Guard. The Magnus can also buff his legion by being able to cast 2 rituals, so his legion can benefit, for example, by re-rolling or improving the AP. Can make Thousans Sons units faster, and Angron can have the aura to ignore modifiers. Fulgrim's abilities basically benefit him and not so much the Emperor's children. They are expected to be able to take care of themselves. Angron's resurrection has been nerfed, only half the wound returning. Fulgrim has the advantage of the speed. He has the longest strength range, advancing and charging, and 16-inch movement is really potent. He has the fight first potential, and he also can poison and do some damage even after he's killed or continuously slowly killing enemies. Angron is still the highest melee damage dealer, especially versus vehicles. Magnus still the best with ranged and shooting damage, and Mortarion is still the most durable, and they are all costing around the 400 mark. So this concludes the video. Let me know what you think. Let me know which Primarch you're rooting for, and let me know if you have some suggestion, comments, and yeah, please press like and subscribe to my channel to help it grow. And if you want to further support my efforts, please consider becoming a YouTube member, GeneralJannis supporter. And with these words, GeneralJannis signing out. Stay safe out there, and bye-bye.